Welcome back to another episode of Make It to Midnight. I am your host, JP Hovey. Thank you for clicking on this episode. It's going to be another great one. This is part 2 of my reaction to the Alex Hormozi and Chris Williamson podcast. And I got 8 more lessons for you guys. I got a quote of the day for you guys. And I have a story about how important it is to fill your time with the proper things. Now, this will look a little bit different than last week's episode because when I typed up the 8 things I learned, I also connected the dots on Google, on ChatGPT to figure out who embodies these lessons that I learned. And the person that, through some research, I found out embodied most of these lessons was Katherine Johnson. If you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, you know who this is. Katherine Johnson she worked at NASA as a mathematician, as an aerospace technologist, everything across the board. But what makes it even more special is that she was coming up in the 1950s and 60s where racism was at its peak. And when the U.S. went to make their first mission around the Earth, who did the astronaut ask for to make sure everything was okay? He asked for Katherine Johnson. I'm going to tell you guys about how she got into that seat. But before we get into that, I got to give you the quote of the day. And it comes from John Maxwell / Teddy Roosevelt / your boy. The only way to guarantee failure is to stop trying or never trying at all. And yes, it is hard. And yes, it sucks when you do fail. And it is inevitable that you will fail. But I promise you, what's even worse than that feeling is the feeling of wondering and wishing that you would have at least tried to become successful. And remember, guys, success does not have to be this big thing. It can be daily wins, monthly wins, yearly wins, whatever it is. Success, you get to measure it, fit it to your life, and keep on pursuing those things. Now, I got one more quick thing for you guys before we dive into Katherine Johnson and the 8 lessons I learned from Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozi. I got to talk about one of my favorite examples of how to prioritize your time with the things that matter most to you, because I was first shown this example back in high school, and I think I was at a summer camp and the speaker came out and he did it, but it has stuck with me ever since high school, and every now and then I see it on my feeds, so I wanted to share it with you guys. So I don't have a jar with me, and a lot of people are listening to this on audio more than they're watching, so I'm going to do my best at being descriptive. So picture you have a jar. An empty pretzel jar, let's say, one of the pretzel jars where you get all the big pretzel sticks. So it's a big jar. You fill it with a bunch of golf balls to the very top. Is that jar full? Your initial reaction would be yes, right? Then pour in a bunch of pebbles. Now the jar is very full, right? There's no more room for anything. Not so fast. Then you pour in sand, and that fills in all the different holes between the golf balls, between the pebbles, and everything else. And this is a jam-packed jar. So what does it all mean? The jar represents your life. The golf balls are your biggest passions, the things that mean the most to you, your family, your friends, what you love to do, how you love to spend your free time, and anything else that you would categorize as the main rocks of your life or golf balls of your life. So what do the pebbles signify? It's all of the second tier things. It could be that second group of friends. Could be you love going and watching movies. Anything that could fall into the secondary importance category of your life. And then what's the sand? The sand is kind of the drama, the gossip, the doom scrolling, all of the little things that can take up your time that should be your lowest priority. Now, what I love about this is if you do not put the golf balls in this jar first and say you start with the sand, it will not be able to be near as full, right? Because the sand will come up halfway. Then if you want to dump the golf balls, the floor is already so much higher. Then there's no room for the pebbles. If you want to do the pebbles first and then the sand, none of it stacks up correctly. The only way to maximize your life, to live it to the fullest, is if you prioritize it with the golf balls or rocks, the pebbles, and then the sand. My twist on it all, because they say this is the image for your life, right? But I think every morning when we wake up, you have this jar, right? And then the first thing you should do, and I struggle with this, I pick up my phone in the morning, but I always have my best mornings when the last thing I do is pick up my phone. And I think it's the perfect example of this jar, because my phone and scrolling on social media is sand. It truly doesn't matter in the grand scheme of life. In the mornings when I neglect it and I wake up, I brush my teeth, I go to the gym and get my workout in, that's when I'm having my better days, my more productive days, because I'm starting with one of my the rock of exercise. Exercise is key to life. Come home, still not turning on the TV, right? You're eating a good breakfast. Another rock. Your health, your diet, your nutrition. It's huge. And then I'm going to work and I'm being as productive as I can be because I've started off the day filling my daily jar with my rocks. Now, as the day goes on, coworkers come in, we have our conversations. We're having fun. We could be screwing around, but I love those moments, right? So those are my pebbles. And then any of the gossip, any of the things I'm getting pissed off about, that's my sand. So every day when you wake up, think about that jar. Think about what your rocks are. Think about what your pebbles are, and think about what your sand is. And then make sure you're filling that jar properly. Remember, put in the big ones first and then fill it up with everything else. Now let's go ahead and get into it, man. Let's get into part 2 of last week's episode. So make sure if you have not watched or listened to last week's episode, go check that out because I gave you 9 more lessons that I learned from these guys. So I got 8 this week, and it's going to be kind of centered around Katherine Johnson's story because she embodies a lot of these lessons. Now, the first lesson, let your ambition speak louder than your need to belong. Nobody exemplifies this quote more than Katherine Johnson because this is the breakdown. This is a brief summary of her story. So she was born in 1918 in West Virginia. Not an ideal place to be born if you're a black woman. So it was extremely hard for her to even get into school, all of these different things. But it didn't matter to her because guess what? She graduated college at 18 years old from West Virginia State College, summa cum laude. And then before she even joined NASA, it's impossible for her to get a job, even though she's a genius, because she is black. There's everything going on. Everything is separate at this time. Segregation is at its peak. Impossible to get any type of job, especially a job as a teacher. But what does she do? She gets a job as a teacher. Then in the 1950s, she hears about an opening in an all-black computing unit with NASA. And let me take it back even more to paint a better picture of exactly the obstacles she was facing, because in the 1930s is when Jesse Owens became one of the greatest Olympic champions of all time for the United States of America. FDR never invited him to the White House. He wasn't even recognized for these records until the late 1950s or 1960s. I can't remember which one, but he put on for our country in the biggest world stage and still didn't get recognized when he came back home. And so that is the world that Katherine Johnson is working her way into, because at NASA, where she joins this all-black team, NASA is full of just old school white people who do not want to see her succeed. And they're doing whatever they can to make sure she doesn't. They're even going as far as she's submitting work, running calculations, and they're claiming the work as their own. They're signing it, handing it to the higher ups, handing it to the superiors, and not giving her the credit. So nobody even knows the work she's doing. But Katherine Johnson still won't let that stop her. This brings me to lesson number 2. You can always find people who have worse conditions than you, but are more successful. This means the only difference is the work. The world doesn't hate you. You're just not good enough yet. In her case, some of the world did hate her, but this quote rings so true, and it is one of the toughest pills to swallow because it's true. The only difference is the work. Katherine Johnson has had it harder than any person in the U.S. right now. Going through any job, if you're white, black, Mexican, whatever it is, nobody had it harder than Katherine Johnson if you compare the 2 time periods. If you go back even further, Epictetus, one of the greatest philosophers, drops all of the best quotes. When he was in his time, he was a slave. This was, early. I'm talking about 80 AD type of early history of the world. Went from slavery to being one of the most, renowned people that we quote today. Countless people in the world. Eric Thomas, who was one of the number 1 public speakers, was homeless in high school. Now he's making millions per appearance. It doesn't mean your condition is not bad. It doesn't mean there's other people that shouldn't be blamed for it. But the quicker you can get over it, the quicker you can accept it. If you work hard enough, you will get there, because if you're good enough, it's undeniable. And Katherine Johnson is the perfect example. She walks herself into these rooms and says, no, I did this. I deserve a seat at this table, and I'm going to prove it to you guys, whether you like it or not. And that's exactly what she did. She was essentially a human calculator. That was her job title. And in 1962, when John Glenn, who was the first American to orbit Earth, and also later became a senator in the U.S. And this John Glenn, if you couldn't guess by his name, he's a white guy. Before he went into that rocket, before he went into orbit, before he went to make history, he was only the 3rd person in the world to orbit. I think the Russians beat us to it twice, or maybe Russia once, China the second time. But before he goes up there, he says, no, I'm not getting in there. I'm not making this flight unless Katherine Johnson hand checks this, inspects it twice. He went out of his way to ask the person that they tried to suppress the most for years. And he said, look, this job's not getting done without her. So unless y'all bring her in here, I'm not going up there, and we're not going to make history. We're not going to catch back up in this space race. And so the rest is history, right? He goes up. She later went on to contribute to the Mercury missions, the Apollo missions, and the different space shuttles. She worked at NASA for almost 30 years. She lived to be over 100, and she has one of the most inspiring stories that I've ever seen, ever read about. I need to go watch the movie Hidden Figures, because actually, fun fact for you guys, Taraji P. Henson, she is also in this movie. We were coworkers. I was an extra on What Men Want. I was in the restaurant. You can see my hairline if you go towards the end of the movie. But yeah, so shout out to Taraji. I know it's been a while since we've seen each other, but I got to go watch Hidden Figures. Katherine Johnson, perfect example of you can always find people who have worse conditions than you but are more successful, and the only difference is the work. She put the work in at a time when nobody wanted to see that work get done by somebody that looked like her. Now, another lesson she embodied. Consistency only looks good in the end and never in the moment. You don't get to see what trying looks like. Despite being a genius, it took her years to be able to get this job with NASA, years to become trusted, even though she was just as smart, but actually smarter than everybody else working there. And she could have easily given up, and she would have been justified to give up. But what did she do? She showed up every single day. She was consistently good. She was consistently better than the competition. She was consistently better than the people above her, and it paid off. And I love that. Consistency only looks good in the end, never in the moment. You don't get to see what trying looks like. Crave the result, but not the process, is to guarantee disappointment. The next one for you guys. If the trade was clear, more people would make the trade. Uncertainty is what scares people. Think about the uncertainty that Katherine Johnson was facing. It was impossible for black people to even get a normal job in this time period. So for her to want to pursue the dream of being a mathematician, there was zero sign of success being anywhere in front of her until she gets into that NASA room. And then she creates her own opportunity. She creates her own luck. And that should be encouraging to everybody today, because, again, she did not know what was ahead of her, but she knew if she showed up, if she was consistent, if she put the work in, if she made her work matter more than the next person's work, it was going to pay off. And the trade, I'm sure, in her head was clear, because she was going to make sure that deal happened. So if the trade was clear, if the trade was more clear, more people would make the trade. Uncertainty is what scares people. Do not be afraid of the uncertainty. Embrace it, because when you look back, that is going to be the fun parts of the story. All right, and I've got 3 left. Only one of them I will draw back to the Katherine Johnson story that you'll be able to find the examples in, and that is suffering gives you the opportunity to create evidence of the person you want to be. I can't say I'm the type of man that can go through hard things without going through the hard things. Katherine Johnson, I'm sure she lived this out every single day. She suffered every single day. She suffered going through school, trying to break down the color barriers in these places. And when you go through all of that and finally get to where it is that you're aiming for, I can't imagine how confident she actually was in herself, because she's probably thinking, if I was able to deal with this when I was 10 years old, and this when I was 20 years old, and this when I was 30 years old, then when I'm 40 and I'm in this role and I'm presenting in front of all of these astronauts, all of the people that are revered in this industry, this is nothing to me, because I have had a life of adversity, of hard work, of failure, and all of those things added up is evidence. She had a life full of evidence to claim who she was in that moment, and everybody else felt it. And that goes back to that first one. Let your ambition speak louder than your need to belong, and you will be more accepted than you ever thought you would be. You know that her ambition, you clearly do not care about fitting in this time period when you're making all these waves, causing all these uproars amongst, your own workplace. But it paid off, because the man that wanted her, because John Glenn, he needed her there. He needed her to be in that room. And that is because of her ambition. She was not trying to placate to anybody. If she was trying to placate to people, she would never have made it to where she was. to where she got to. These next three quotes from Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozi are great for everyone across the board, especially people, I feel like, getting their feet wet in the work world, in the workforce. I guess whether you're younger or older, if you're getting into a new industry, whatever it may be. The first one is the story from a Buddha, and it is called the story of the second arrow. If I shoot you with an arrow, does it hurt? The answer is yes. If I shoot you with a second arrow, would it hurt? The answer is also yes. But the only difference is that you have no control over the first arrow, but you do have control over the second arrow. In life, we cannot control the first arrow. However, the second arrow is optional. Only suffer once. The way I take this one is do not shoot yourself in the foot. Once you go out there and make the mistake, learn from it and do not repeat it. But the key in that whole sentence is the very first part. Make the mistake. It's what this whole episode is about. It's what the quote of the day was about. It's about trying, making the mistakes, because making the mistakes and learning from it is the only way that you build evidence into becoming the person you say you want to be. Because if you don't go through that mistake, you're not going to gain that knowledge. You're not going to gain that confidence that comes from building back better. All right. And the second to last one, this especially if you're just leaving college, if you're going into a new field, if you don't have a family, if you kind of just have a little bit more freedom to yourself, this one is massive. This one helped me. Without this lesson right here, I wouldn't have been able to get my current job right now. And I cannot speak more highly about this one. Proximity is everything when you're young. There's a difference between getting 2D lessons and 3D lessons. A 2D lesson is basically you could watch this video, you could hear about all these things, all these quotes about trying, how the only way to guarantee failure is to not try, and all of these things. You hear it, you know about it, but that's about it. The 3D lesson, you're in it, and you say you go to a new job and you actually fail, but you keep going and you build that evidence into becoming the person you want to be. That would be the 3D lesson. But the proximity is everything, because you're not going to be able to make those mistakes if you're not actually in the area that you want to be in the area around people that you want to be like, that you want to pass, that you want to learn from. For me, I would have no chance at making any connections if I did not get uncomfortable and move to these bigger cities with bigger markets, with more opportunities, more people in general. When I leave college, I went to Dallas. When I left Dallas, I went to Tampa, Sarasota, Bradenton. And then I went from Bradenton to Boca. All of these places was not just by accident that I'm choosing. I'm going because they were hotbeds for sports. They're a hotbed for people with money, and they're a hotbed for people with connections. So you got to go get around them. If you don't get around them, you're never going to meet them, and you're never going to learn from these people. And if you don't learn from them, you're not going to get to where you want to go. Proximity truly is everything. I'm in Nashville right now, and I talk about it with my friends all of the time. It's one of the greatest cities to network in because it's a big city name, but the actual size of the city physically is still small. So it's so easy to get connected. It's so easy to just learn all different types of things you do like, things you don't like. Proximity is everything. If you can make the moves, make the move. I promise it will be worth it. Temporary loneliness, it will pass if you put yourself out there, if you're willing to make the mistake, and it will help you become who you want to become. And the last one, this is a great one because in this world we love to share our political opinions online. We love to share any opinion online, and we love to think our opinion is always correct. But this is the quote from Alex. So many people are scared of changing even though the belief wasn't theirs to begin with. To me, this draws back to authenticity because so many people are guilty of this exact thing. You're believing something because you saw it on TV, you saw it on Twitter, you saw it on Instagram, and that is how it should be. There's the virtue signalers out there. There's all these different types of people out there telling you how you should feel, even though they are just the epitome of what somebody else is feeling. It's not even their own thought that they're putting out there. But because so many people have audiences nowadays, it's very easy to get some of these messages across that you didn't even come up with. Now, that is a positive thing because in a world where that is very prevalent and popular, it's even more popular and you will stand out even more if you do have your own beliefs, you have your own convictions, you stand up for what you believe in and you back up what you believe in. But also listening to other people and to see what they believe in, because I know we talked about it in an earlier episode. Everybody can be your master at something. You are not great at every single thing. You don't see both sides of the coin on every single matter. So don't be afraid, because I'm sure we all have beliefs that are not truly our own, and it's just something that we've seen somewhere else, we've taken from someone. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I have plenty of role models that I look up to, and I know that foundationally I align with them on. And that's the key. You have to have the foundation, right? You can believe the actual sentence or tweet, whatever they're putting out there, but you need to know inside that regardless of what is being said all around the world in the public conversation, you know what you believe, you know your foundation, and people can see that through you, because authenticity plays stronger than any other card that you have in your hand. I promise you that. And that will wrap it up for episode 13 of Make It to Midnight. Thank you guys for listening. Shout out to Katherine Johnson. Shout out to Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozi for dropping this banger of a podcast and dropping some knowledge on us. I hope you learned something. I hope you'll check out the previous episodes. I hope you'll check out the future episodes. If you are watching this on YouTube right now, thank you. Leave a comment if you can, or subscribe. I appreciate either one. If you're listening, shout out to you for listening, because I think in the last month we just hit 100 downloads, which is massive. That's the most downloads I've had in a month so far, and none of that is possible without you guys. So again, I hope you learned something. Thank you for being here. Help somebody make it to midnight this week. Keep making it to midnight yourself, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy your Friday.